I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, the morning sun spilling over the skyline of downtown Chicago, and yet I felt a chill. My silk blouse brushed against my skin, soft and expensive, but it did nothing to ease the tight knot in my stomach. My phone buzzed on the marble countertop, breaking the quiet hum of the city below. The caller ID flashed my sister's name. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, memories I thought were buried clawing their way back. I hadn't seen her in years, not since that day at her wedding. The day she slapped me in front of 200 guests because I refused to hand over my home, the one my parents had left me. I had carried the sting of humiliation, the whispers behind my back, but also the quiet pride that I had stood my ground. I pressed ignore and let the vibration fade, but my mind raced. Could she really have the nerve to call me now? My apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and coffee. The aroma should have been comforting, but instead it reminded me how much had changed since that day. The view of the city that had once seemed overwhelming now felt like mine, claimed through hard work, late nights, and determination. And yet, my heart skipped. The confrontation I had avoided for so long was suddenly unavoidable. I braced myself, feeling the weight of every choice I had ever made, every line I had drawn, every door I had closed. This was going to be interesting. I still remember that summer day as if it were etched into my skin. The sun poured relentlessly through the lace curtains of our parents' old house, the air heavy with the scent of gardenias from Mom's backyard. I had been 19, full of hope and fear, and ready to start my first real job after college. My sister, Emily, was buzzing with excitement about her wedding, oblivious, or maybe indifferent, to the storm brewing inside me. I had been careful, I thought, explaining that the house I inherited was my sanctuary, my safety net, the culmination of years of dreams my parents had entrusted to me. But she didn't want careful explanations. She wanted entitlement, and when I said no, her face hardened, her green eyes flashing with anger. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped, her voice rising. Guests were milling around, champagne glasses in hand, smiles frozen on their faces. "Mom and Dad wanted us to share everything. That house is mine, too." My hands shook as I clutched the small silver locket Mom had given me before she passed, a symbol of her belief in me, in independence, in standing tall when the world demanded otherwise. I could feel the lump in my throat, the sharp sting of betrayal. My parents weren't there to witness this. It was just her, me, and the judgment of everyone watching. "I can't," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "This house, it's mine. And I won't give it to you, Emily. I just can't." The slap came before I could react. A burning, hot shock across my cheek in front of 200 people, gasps echoing around me. I felt my face sting, my heart pounding, my entire body frozen. Humiliation collided with a strange, quiet resolve I knew, in that instant, that I had to rely on myself. Later that night, sitting on the balcony with the locket in my hand, I whispered a promise to myself. I would build a life that no one could take from me. I would forge my path, step by step, with sweat, heartache, and determination. And one day, the world would see the woman I was becoming, not the scared, compliant girl who bowed to anyone's demands. That moment, painful as it was, planted the seed of my independence. The slap, the anger, the betrayal, it became the fuel that propelled me forward. After that summer, I left my parents' house with nothing but a suitcase, my laptop, and the silver locket clutched tightly in my hand. I rented a tiny studio in a part of Chicago that smelled faintly of coffee and exhaust fumes, a far cry from the spacious, sunlit rooms I had grown up in. But I had something those walls could never provide: determination. I was going to build my life on my terms. I threw myself into my work. My first weeks were brutal. Nights blurred into mornings as I learned every skill I needed to survive in the competitive world of real estate. The first client who trusted me with their property felt like a small miracle. The first sale I closed without anyone's help was electric, filling me with a pride I hadn't known I could feel. Yet, despite the small victories, self-doubt lingered. Could I really do this alone? Was I strong enough to thrive where everyone expected me to fail? That's when I met Claire, a seasoned mentor with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of humor. She didn't sugarcoat anything. Success, she told me over our first coffee, doesn't wait for anyone. You want it? You grab it. And if anyone says you can't, you show them that you can. Her words became my mantra. Every setback, every failed pitch, every long night spent crunching numbers, I reminded myself, I am not the girl my sister slapped. I am a woman building something no one can take from me. I began investing wisely, flipping small properties, learning the ins and outs of contracts, and building a network of clients who trusted my instincts. My apartment slowly transformed from a modest studio into a polished, sophisticated space, filled with subtle reminders of my growth, framed certificates, a small but elegant art collection, the silver locket resting on my dresser like a talisman. All the while, I kept my success hidden from Emily and our family. I posted only vague, modest updates on social media, enough to seem normal, enough to avoid prying questions. I didn't need their approval, nor did I want their judgment. My joy came from quiet victories, my first profitable deal, my first high-profile client, the first time I signed a contract worth more than I had ever imagined. Each achievement was a brick in the foundation of my independence, each one quietly marking my evolution from vulnerable girl to self-made woman. Some nights, when the city lights reflected in my window, I would hold the locket, remembering that slap, that humiliation. Instead of pain, it now felt like fuel, a spark that had ignited a fire within me. Emily had thought she could break me, make me bend to her demands, or guilt me into surrendering my life. But she had underestimated me, as everyone did. I had taken the worst moment of my life and used it to forge a future no one could touch. And so, by the time the invitations to her next family events arrived, I was no longer the timid girl who flinched in fear. I was a woman who knew her worth, a woman who could finally face the world on her terms, and perhaps, one day, face Emily too. The day arrived sooner than I expected. Emily's wedding, now another chapter in her life, was being held at an opulent venue on the lakefront. I hadn't planned to attend, but when my assistant told me the event planner insisted on confirming my RSVP, I realized it was time. Not for revenge, not for drama, but because I was no longer the girl who could be humiliated and silenced. I was a woman who owned her life, her choices, and yes, her home. I stepped into the ballroom, the chandeliers casting soft, golden light over white linen tables and floral arrangements that smelled faintly of roses and lilies. Guests turned as I walked in, whispers trailing in my wake. I could see Emily at the center of it all, radiant, her smile wide, unaware of the storm quietly approaching. She froze the moment she saw me, her perfectly painted nails tightening around her bouquet. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I came to see the wedding," I said simply, letting a small, controlled smile curl on my lips. "And to say hello." The irony wasn't lost on me as she opened her mouth, perhaps to say something sharp, before faltering. The memory of that slap, 200 eyes staring, the sting, the humiliation, flashed briefly behind my calm exterior. But I was no longer the girl who had flinched. After the ceremony, I requested a private tour of the venue's balcony area, ostensibly to make a call. The moment Emily stepped aside, I revealed my presence, a deed in my hand, the contract for a prime waterfront property she had been eyeing for months, my property. "Emily," I said, letting my voice float over the gentle clinking of champagne glasses, "this is mine. And no, you can't have it." Her lips parted in shock. "Wait, this house? You own this?" I nodded, letting the weight of my words settle in the room. Every brick, every square foot. And not just this house. My portfolio, my business, my achievements, they're mine. I didn't get here by asking for favors, by surrendering to pressure, or by letting anyone dictate my worth. I built this. The reactions were instantaneous. A few guests whispered behind cupped hands, unsure whether to be impressed or scandalized. Emily's jaw dropped, and for a moment, I saw the raw mix of emotions I had expected: disbelief, shame, perhaps even guilt. She had assumed I was struggling quietly, that the girl she humiliated had remained timid, compliant. Instead, she was staring at a woman who radiated power, confidence, and self-respect. I gestured around my small, discreet notes that had made their way into the planning. The investment portfolio I had quietly amassed, the small but elegant artworks that spoke of my travels and taste, the letters from clients praising my acumen. Everything pointed to the truth. I was no longer vulnerable. I was formidable. "Emily," I said softly, yet firmly, "I hope you understand why I said no years ago. And I hope you understand now why this house and everything I've built isn't for anyone else's entitlement. You may have wanted it, demanded it, even believed you deserved it. But it's mine. And I earned it." Her face went pale, her hands trembling around her bouquet. I let the silence hang, letting her process the full weight of what she had just realized. She had expected compliance. She got a lesson in self-worth. And in that moment, surrounded by 200 guests who had silently witnessed my rise from humiliation to triumph, I finally felt the quiet satisfaction of being wholly, unapologetically me. After the initial shock had settled, I realized I held more than just the upper hand. I held the power to reshape the dynamics that had tormented me for years. Emily and our family had underestimated me, assumed my compliance, and thought my kindness equaled weakness. They were wrong. I had no intention of revenge, but I would set boundaries, and I would make it clear that respect and growth were now non-negotiable. I invited Emily and my parents to my apartment later that evening, framing it as a casual meeting to discuss family matters. The moment they stepped into my space, they were struck silent. Every detail, the polished oak floors, the curated art on the walls, the subtle scent of vanilla mingled with espresso, spoke of discipline, taste, and independence. I didn't rush them, letting the silence underline the truth of what I had achieved. "Before we go any further," I said, taking a deep breath, "I want to make something clear. Things are not the way they were before. I am not here to be manipulated or guilt. I am not the girl I used to be." Emily's eyes widened. She looked as if she might protest, but I held up a hand. "Listen, I will help, but only if you're willing to meet certain conditions." The list was precise. Emily would seek professional counseling to address entitlement and control issues she had displayed. She would commit to building her own financial independence, even if small steps were all she could manage at first. She would apologize, not just with words, but through consistent actions reflecting change. And she would respect my boundaries regarding my home and my assets, acknowledging that my achievements were mine alone. I turned to our parents. "And you," I said softly but firmly, "need to stop enabling her entitlement and start supporting accountability. You taught me to stand on my own. It's time you reinforced that lesson for both of us, equally." It was not cruelty, I reminded myself, it was fairness. Compassion without compromise. Emily had been given countless chances to respect my life and choices. She had failed. But if she could commit to growth, if she could show humility and self-awareness, I would allow her into my life in a healthier, more honest way. The room was thick with tension, but also, I could sense the flicker of realization. Emily's shoulders sagged slightly, a quiet acknowledgement that the path forward would be different from the one she expected. I didn't soften my tone or bend my rules. My power didn't need dramatics. It existed in my calm certainty and the clarity of my boundaries. "I care about you, Emily," I said. "But caring doesn't mean surrendering my life. It doesn't mean giving away what I've built. If you want a place in my life, you will meet me here, on terms of respect, accountability, and growth. Anything less is unacceptable." She nodded, finally, a small but meaningful gesture. My parents exchanged glances, silent but attentive, realizing that I was no longer the obedient daughter who silently absorbed their family's conflicts. I had become the arbiter of my own life, and anyone who wished to share it would do so under my conditions, not theirs. I felt a quiet satisfaction settle in me. The power shift wasn't just about money or property. It was about self-respect, dignity, and reclaiming the narrative of my life. Months passed, and the changes I had demanded began to take root. Emily started therapy, her entitlement slowly giving way to reflection. She learned to respect boundaries, and though it wasn't perfect, it was progress. She even took small steps toward her own financial independence, opening a modest business that gave her confidence without encroaching on mine. Our parents, too, began to shift. They no longer placed me in the role of mediator or caretaker. They listened when I spoke, respected my decisions, and gradually came to understand that the woman I had become was no longer the same girl they had once tried to mold. The slap that had once defined a moment of humiliation was no longer a shadow over my life. It was a catalyst for change, growth, and empowerment. I often found myself sitting on my balcony, holding the silver locket my mother had given me, the token that had reminded me to believe in myself when the world tried to dictate otherwise. I traced the delicate filigree, thinking of how far I had come. Every late night, every challenge, every choice to stand firm had led me here, to a life where I was respected, independent, and fulfilled. Sometimes, Emily would stop by with a new client's check or a story of a challenge she overcame. I'd smile, acknowledging her growth without losing my own ground. Compassion and firmness had become my guiding principles, and I finally understood that setting boundaries didn't mean cutting people off. It meant giving them the opportunity to rise to meet me. Looking out over the city, the skyline shimmering with golden lights, I felt a quiet pride. The journey had been painful, filled with moments that threatened to break me, but each hardship had strengthened my resolve. I had transformed from a girl defined by others' expectations into a woman who owned her life, her home, her career, her choices, and her dignity. The locket rested in my palm as I whispered a silent promise. I would continue to honor myself, to stand firm, and to embrace the strength I had cultivated. The past had shaped me, but it did not control me. And as I turned toward the warmth of my apartment, the soft glow of lamps casting gentle shadows on my walls, I spoke the line that had carried me through so many storms. I am my own, and that is more than enough.